listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889.
Thank you for listening to Community Forum. My name is Johnny Chandler, the owner of KCCC 930 AM, the host of Community Forum, and with me for part 2 this week is Paul Gessing. Paul Gessing is the president of the Rio Grande Foundation. If you missed Tuesday, September 16th's radio show, go to kccc930am.com. You'll be able to listen to that there. And so those topics were, we talked about Charlie Kirk, 9/11, the special session specifically, so that would be a good thing for everybody to listen to if you have not heard it. This one, we're going to focus on universal childcare, growing permanent fund, and roads. And we're a very rural state with a lot of roads, so that should be very interesting in that. So, Paul, welcome, and thank you for sticking around for part 2.
Thanks, Johnny. Good to be back with you.
Yeah, so probably one of the biggest announcements recently outside of the special session, even though the special session was kind of something that if you're paying attention, you knew was probably going to happen. I feel like this universal childcare edict or directive from the governor really came out of left field. Like, that was not something that I was ever expecting, and I kind of pay attention a little bit.
Yeah, you pay attention a lot. Certainly, you talk about things like this and other political policy issues around New Mexico, as do I. And I agree with you. I thought it was kind of out of left field. But not to be a conspiracy theorist, I normally just take the politicians at their word. But I've tried. This is 7 years of this governor, and I've really made a genuine effort to try to get inside her head, understand what she is thinking, because needless to say, the governor and I have very, very different views of the way the world works and what she is trying to do or claims to be trying to do with New Mexico government. But you have to understand, so just a week ago, the CYFD secretary resigned. Most people say that she was fired based on the suddenness of the issue. Now, CYFD, that's the Children, Youth, and Families Department. It has been an absolute disaster, specifically under this governor. And I think it's maybe somewhat unfair to completely blame the governor. Obviously, 9/11, sorry. Thinking about that. But COVID and the issues around that and just the ongoing poverty and poverty of values that we see throughout New Mexico, a lot of different factors. And once you have family dysfunction and children involved, it is very hard for the government to kind of step in and save the situation. And that's not an area that we are involved in. But I have to think that her failure to really make that system work and the ongoing open wound that represents is probably part of what's driving this decision, as well as, quite frankly, her failure across numerous agenda items that we would want our political leadership in New Mexico to address. And, there's no way, in my estimation, at this point, that this governor, after 8 years, can claim to be a successful governor. She's done a lot of damage while she's been in office. Our education system is worse than it's ever been. Again, children-related issue. While she claimed that we were going to have this moonshot, the CYFD situation, the economy, yes, we've kind of bounced along, but we still trail our neighbors. Our poverty rate is outrageous. We've had billions and billions and billions of dollars flowing into the state from the oil and gas industry. For what effect? Not a whole heck of a lot. So I think it's a diversionary tactic. I think this governor is using this plan for universal childcare to, again, do what she especially, but many New Mexico politicians do, which is a little bit of sleight of hand. It's the magician. You got the bird in the left hand and you wave it around and, boom, you're doing magic. And I think a lot of this is the governor looking for positive headlines at a time when she's really failed New Mexico miserably.
So, I know that's not a universal childcare or like childcare after school childcare, stuff like that is not really what Rio Grande Foundation focuses on, but it is a huge, it has to be massive tax implications for something like this. Like, how are we ever, and just a quick story down here in Carlsbad, New Mexico, Eddy County, New Mexico, the waiting list for childcare is unbelievable. There's people willing to pay the amount that childcare costs, and they still can't get their kids in there because there's just not enough facilities, not enough childcare certified employees. And I know it's a compounding problem. And it's very difficult. I guess that's why they're up in Santa Fe. But how do we afford something like this continuously?
Well, let's start with where things are in advance of the governor's announcement. For starters, it is worth noting that New Mexico, largely through the use of federal dollars, has currently in place free childcare for anybody making up to 400% of the federal poverty level. Now, 400% is already a very high salary level for a lot of New Mexicans. I've seen different calculations, but I went directly to the federal government's poverty guidelines. You can find these. I blogged it at airsofenchantment.com. A family of three making $106,600 annually qualifies as 400%, meaning they are already eligible for free childcare under previous programs by the state of New Mexico. What the governor's doing here is, very ironically, for someone who espouses a progressive ideology, geared towards government helping out poor and low income people, she's actually making this universal in a way that would be a massive boon for people of higher income levels, wealthier New Mexicans, people making well over $106,600 for a family of three, which again is, I think, a very nice income level, especially considering that according to the Census Bureau, the median household income in New Mexico is $62,268. So right there, you're already talking almost double the median income for a family of three, and you're getting that service already provided. Now, the existing program for free, quote unquote, childcare, $463 million a year. Making it universal will cost an estimated $120 million, although, of course, that'll go up very dramatically if and when this program is fully implemented. And then an additional $20 million for capital projects, which I presume would be handed over to various providers in need of buildings and construction. So we're talking about a fair amount of money, but it's all geared towards high-income New Mexicans. You're right. The amount of people willing to do this job is going to be a problem. It's already a problem. Background checks and challenges with qualified staff who you can vet and make sure that they're not a threat to those children is a concern. This is something, interestingly, that will begin on November 1st. So the governor administratively is already going to be implementing this in relatively short order, less than 2 months. We will see legislation in the 30-day session in which the legislature will be asked to make this program, something that they fund on a more permanent basis, and they enshrine this into legislation in the 30-day session. So we will definitely see a fairly big fight over this, and the Republicans will be able to argue, no, we don't need to expand this program for wealthy New Mexicans. We should be targeting our government resources on those of more modest means and lower incomes who actually cannot afford childcare. So it's a very bizarre proposal by this governor.
I'm a little surprised compared to all the other mandates that she's put down, and I'm thinking about EV mandates, right? With all the other mandates she's kind of dropped on New Mexicans, none of those really go into effect until after she's no longer governor, right? Right. So she's instituted a lot of things that go into effect for the next governor. And so I kind of found it interesting that she just didn't announce this one and say it's effective in 2027, right? Or something like that. I'm kind of surprised she didn't push this one back to where she's saddling it with a different governor.
Well, to be fair, this is seen as a government benefit and a entitlement that she looks at, and certainly I think a lot of people will look at as, all gain for no pain. And of course, what would happen with that money otherwise? Likely it would be put into our massive and growing permanent funds. So, it's one of those aspects of New Mexico government where when the state is flush with cash, as they continue to be from the oil and gas industry, what do you do with that money? Well, the progressives, the Democrats, are not going to return it in the form of tax reductions. They are likely to either create new government programs or put it into those permanent funds, which, by the way, Johnny, the permanent fund in New Mexico, the total array of those, what are called sovereign wealth funds, has grown from $58 billion as we started 2025. By mid-August, the total of those permanent funds, those sovereign wealth funds, was $64 billion. So we saw the growth of $6 billion in just 7.5 months. And now there's realistic talk about $100 billion being contained in those funds. And, until the people of New Mexico demand that much of that money be restored to New Mexicans or handed out in the form of tax reductions to the income tax, the gross receipts tax, Social Security tax, we're just going to have massive amounts of money for politicians to spend willy-nilly on whatever they want. And, within that scope, $120 million annually starting cost is trivial, even for a policy that actually benefits predominantly wealthy New Mexicans. But you know what it does is it puts New Mexico, puts Michelle Lujan Grisham's name up there in lights as the only state and the governor who's leading us there to provide free universal childcare. It gives her a lot of positive headlines, even if people don't scratch even an inch below the surface.
Right. Okay. Good point there for sure. So you talked about the growing permanent fund. That's a pretty good segue. I'll start by saying thank you to everybody here in Eddy County and Lee County, New Mexico, where we're heard over the air. So I'd like to thank all of you personally for the hard work you've done to help make the state very wealthy. So good job for you all. We live it every day. So thank you all very much. You said $64 billion. Is that what you said it was now?
$64 billion. That was reported in mid-August.
Wow. I mean, that is, I don't, that's a tremendous amount of money. And obviously you feel like we are not spending that responsibly because we're not spending it at all, right? We're not doing anything to try to relieve the tax burden for the state. I mean, I have a pretty low gross receipts tax down here in Eddy County, right? Compared to you guys, we're 5.7083 or something like that. You got to get that deep into it when you're paying your gross receipts tax. And, and I still feel like I'm paying too much, but that's nothing compared to like Santa Fe County and Bernalillo County and the city of Albuquerque and things of that nature. We've talked about that in the past. Is I'd love to see the gross receipts tax loophole. I'd like to see that just go away. Of course, 100%.
Absolutely. And while certainly I use these permanent funds and the way that the government has locked up all this money as an example of just government being greedy and sitting on piles of cash while New Mexicans remain among the poorest people in any state in the entire country. And that juxtaposition is absolutely worth highlighting and putting on full display because it's extremely true. I wrote an entire article for National Review titled "Rich State, Poor People," and that's absolutely the highlight of that. But we've had multi-billion-dollar government budget surpluses in recent years. This year, it's quote only $500 million. The fact is, though, the state does not prioritize economic growth in the private sector. It doesn't prioritize. We're going to talk about roads. It doesn't prioritize, basic infrastructure needs, and the efficacy of our education system. While it's got a lot of growth and money, the results have not been there because of the way it's been managed. So No, you can't solve, it's just like regular life. You can't solve all of your problems with money, but there's a lot of problems you can solve with money. And New Mexico is quite frankly not solving its problems with the resources we have available, which are quite ample. And yes, economic diversification, attacking poverty, those are two things that absolutely we could be doing, but are simply not because of the people we've elected.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna mention too, is the idea of, I think we spend more per person in education than any other state, right, per capita.
Not every other state, but
it's
certainly nearby.
okay.
Our neighbors don't spend as much, and it's grown dramatically per pupil for sure.
Right. So that's just a prime example. You can throw as much money as you want at a problem, but I don't know if the money's not the issue for us necessarily. Maybe they're not spending it responsibly, according to you and some other sources. But the idea is we don't seem to be in a position to throw money at a problem to solve it. I don't know if what we're not doing as a state to help us get over the hurdle, because we can keep throwing money per student. We can keep throwing money at these things. We have how much in capital outlay money ready to be spent that we for some reason can't.
7.2 billion, yeah. 7.2 billion on that.
So why can't we move it? Why can't we move any of this money? Like, why are we having issues moving this cash to make the impact that it's been set aside for?
Well, let me briefly say that the free childcare is yet another example of failure of government and then papering over that using more cash, more tax dollars to do that. So rather than fixing the system that's broken, our politicians and this governor has been the absolute poster child for that. They just want to spend more money. And that's obviously a huge, huge problem. So with regard to, can you refresh my memory? You were going to ask me something about?
Well, I'm just really curious as to a state that has this much money. Money is not our problem. All right. I'm guessing it's leadership is potentially our problem. Like, so, and I just use the amount of capital outlay money that we have set aside as an example of all the money that we have, yet we're not able to move it. So that's not a money problem. That's like an intellect problem, a leadership problem,
All of the above. And yes, so we've talked about roads extensively. I know there's serious issues on 285 and other roads in southeast New Mexico. We've also talked about I-40 and the need to both expand that to 3 lanes each way and dramatically overhaul that road. It was an article in the Albuquerque Journal on this Monday that involved a conversation about roads, and there was a lot of pleading poverty among not just politicians, but folks who are involved in road maintenance and management. There were specifically some quotes by Senator Mo Maestas, who's here in Albuquerque, and actually one of the more sane Democrats up in the legislature, who was saying, well, we missed an opportunity 30 years ago. We should have started phasing in increase in the gas tax. And I actually really do. I really like Mo. He was my representative when he was in the House here on the west side of Albuquerque. But I criticized him, and then he got involved in a Facebook discussion, and we had a pretty healthy engagement, speaking of kind of interpersonal dynamics and going back and forth and debating an issue. But the long story short is that there are numerous ways to improve our roads, one of those being that pot of capital outlay money. And it's money explicitly set aside for capital projects, building projects. It's part of the pork barrel process that we use in this state, which really isn't a process, it's just a grab bag. We need to use that money to rebuild our roads and infrastructure, which is declining. And one of the factors in that is the fact that we have a 17-cent per gallon gas tax. It is among the lowest in the country. And over time, inflation takes a bite out of the ability for that money to be used effectively. The amount of money that buys something gets reduced. I get all that. And then I brought up, of course, one aspect of that is that, well, we don't still charge any fees to electric vehicles in New Mexico. And those are extremely heavy vehicles that get off scot-free from paying for the roads that they drive in. And we've had bills introduced by Democrats to address that they haven't gone anywhere. Clearly, if the governor wanted those bills to cross her desk, she could put some pressure on the legislature to do that. We have tribal lands. Tribes sell gas. They don't charge the 17-cent per gallon state gas tax. That's how they're able to undercut some of their neighbors. There's ways to adjust taxation where that the tribes would actually have to charge gas tax when they sell gasoline. We have the $6.4 billion permanent fund. We should be, if we're going to set up permanent funds for this, that, and the other, we should have set up, and it could easily have set up permanent fund to fund road building and maintenance across our state with some of that money as well. And let's see, the prevailing wage law I always talk about because that hikes up the wage on construction projects unnecessarily just because the trades have a lot of power up in Santa Fe. So those are a handful of different things that I think should be contemplated before we go down the path of raising taxes. I understand the justification, and I am willing to discuss that and debate that with Senator Maestas, but I think we've got to do 2 or 3 of the things that I'm talking about before we really start seriously talking about raising gas taxes on everyday New Mexicans. So there's money, there's resources, including capital dollars, but we just need the leadership and the will to actually use that money for a purpose that would save lives in New Mexico. Legitimately significant safety issues exist on our roads, and we need to be dealing with those.
Yeah, we feel that down here in southeast New Mexico more than anybody. The amount of large, heavy semi trucks we have driving around the road between Carlsbad and Hobbs is quite possibly one of the most treacherous drives in the country. I would say, if you've not done that drive, it gets really gnarly, especially around the mornings and the evenings with everybody driving back and forth. And I don't want to take away from anything you just said, and thank you very much for that. But I'm stuck on the idea that you said that I-40 needs to be 3 lanes. That's the first time I ever heard that. You believe it should be 3 lanes through the whole state?
Absolutely.
Right. Does that make it 4 lanes through the canyon? Yeah. Because when you go to the canyon, it's like three lanes every once in a while, or you just stay permanently 3 lanes.
I'm just saying, I'm not a road engineer. I would want to see discussion about that and how much of a challenge that would be. I get it. Yeah. Tejares Canyon here on the east side of Albuquerque is a unique stretch of land, but I'm specifically just talking about the amount of truck traffic, especially between Albuquerque and the Arizona state line.
Yeah.
It does get a little busy and hectic on the way to Texas, but the real serious issues are west of Albuquerque all the way to the Arizona border. And there's a lot of challenges, and that's a huge truck corridor.
Yeah.
Because of its proximity and approach to the West Coast. And we should really be focused on those kinds of things. I could go on. There's all kinds of different issues across the state of New Mexico, plus our rest areas. And I think there needs to be some innovative thought put towards our rest areas and ways to, hopefully leverage private sector dollars to make those presentable. Because in many ways, for motorists, the rest areas are they're like the welcome sign on the doormat entering people's houses. And by and large, they're really crappy. They're worse than any other state's rest areas on a per, each one is generally worse than almost any other state in the country.
Yeah, they're rebuilding two rest stops east of Albuquerque. They're closed currently. They tore them down completely. I guess that's even east of Moriarty. The only reason I know this is because I drive to Albuquerque so often from Carlsbad. And then, I'm glad you brought up rest areas because I'm actually going to figure this out with the Department of Transportation. There's a rest area between Roswell and Vaughn, right? That is a pretty critical stop. You know what I mean? Because it's so desolate out there.
Yep.
They tore it down, the old one. They rebuilt a brand new one. And now I've been to Albuquerque 3 times in the past month easily, if not more than that. And now that brand new rest area with a brand new bathroom and brand new building is completely closed because there's something wrong with the restrooms already, but it's brand new.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So it's just, it's just like, literally I drive by it. I was like, good thing I stopped in Roswell because I know I can't rely on this brand new rest stop that they just built. So it's very, you bring it up, and I'm like, It's like you're in my head a little bit, Paul, because I personally have been a little upset about this rest area being shut down. It's like brand new, you know?
Well, I don't know if, and we haven't put out any policy documents on this, but I mentioned I was on the East Coast, and while we flew from Albuquerque to Baltimore, we drove around a lot on the East Coast. And if you go to the East Coast, especially I-95, and granted, this probably won't fly in a lot of that Roswell to Vaughn kind of area, but I think I-40 is perfect for this. A lot of the rest areas in the East Coast are these kind of hybrids where you don't even have to leave the freeway. You just go briefly off of it, and you've got a gas station, you've got a few fast food joints, and the restrooms are there, and they're maintained by the contractor that's in that facility. And you've got a lot of different things that you can need while you're on the road that you don't even have to exit the freeway and go out hunting for things. I think, if I were governor, I would seriously contemplate doing that on a lot of the heavily traveled roads. Again, you barely have any place to stop between Roswell and Albuquerque. I mean, you really do have a few items down there in Vaughn to even contemplate. But we need to come up with innovative solutions. The state is awash in cash. It should not be so poorly managed as it is right now. But we're just spinning our wheels with these horrendous progressive so-called policies, and we desperately need change here in New Mexico. And it's quite frankly not going to come until at least November of 2026. So we're just going to try to fight these bad ideas in Santa Fe, maybe score a small victory in favor of sanity along the way, and just do our best, because the voters need to wake up. This state has so much potential, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot left and right.
So I wanted to ask you one other question. You and I didn't discuss this. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I want to talk about the governor's race, even though we're still pretty far away from that, right?
Sure.
We got Sam Bregman. We have Deb Haaland. And do you have any insight at all as to whether we're going to have a Republican challenger for governor at all?
Well, all we've got right now is Greg Hall,
right,
from Rio Rancho, and I think he's a worthy candidate. I don't want to disparage Greg. I do hope we have another candidate or two, because I think it's good to have, for such a high-profile office, some competition. There's John Sanchez, the former lieutenant governor. I question whether he really wants to run. I have the same feelings about Judy Nakamura, and I throw on top of it, I'm not sure how conservative she really is politically, and whether she wants to run. I know Duke Rodriguez, who made his name in the marijuana business and also working with the Gary Johnson administration. I think he's going to run. I actually think he may be the strongest candidate, but I'm willing to withhold judgment and certainly watch as a process unfolds. I definitely want to see more from those Republicans. On the Democrat side, as originally kind of outlined, it was uber progressive Deb Haaland versus more moderate Sam Bregman and Ken Miyagishima, the former mayor of Las Cruces. Bregman is known in the Albuquerque area because he's district attorney up here in Bernalillo County. But a big problem for Sam Bregman is that his campaign is headed up by a guy named John Lipschitz, who is also the head of a trial attorney organization that spent the last few years fighting against reform of our medical malpractice laws and the issues that address our medical provider shortage. Lipschitz is running Bregman's campaign while running an organization called New Mexico Safety Over Profit, which took in $1.3 million from trial attorneys to fight medical malpractice reform. Bregman has, in numerous instances, I've heard people and talked to people who on both sides of the aisle who know him well. He's an attorney himself. They say that he has no interest in reforming the medical malpractice law issue in New Mexico. And with that campaign staffing issue, I think that is only reinforced and highlighted. I'm not sure that you can wrap yourself in the moderate mantle running for governor, even at the Democratic Party level, and not put that at least on the agenda. So I don't know how that race is going to go on the Democratic side. Miyagishima may be able to take the mantle of the moderate, but of course, he's down in Las Cruces. People don't know him in Albuquerque. People know Bregman up in Albuquerque, but they don't know him around other parts of the state. If both of them stay in the race, I think Collins takes the win. One of them has to drop out, and one of them has to run a competent, moderate campaign that appeals to those DTS, decline to state, and Republicans who might jump ship to vote in a Democratic primary to prevent Deb Haaland from being our next governor. So that's going to be the big kind of a trajectory of that governor's race. That and just who else joins the party on the Republican side. So we're, of course, waiting and watching and looking to see how that all goes.
When should Republican challengers, minus Greg Hull's already announced, right? If there's any other challengers on the Republican side, when's the last date that they could possibly announce to start getting some, like, I mean, are they already too late?
The primary will be in June
of
next year. So I really think realistically, I think December 31st, 2025, I think they need to be out ready to go by the end of this year. Mark Murphy down in your area of the state is also considering running. Ironically, and I know we've got limited time here, but ironically, we've got Republicans, solid candidates running in CD1 and CD3. District 1 is Kinsbury. That is a 10-point Democrat seat. We have a Republican running in CD3 against Leger Fernandez, Martin Zamora, a state rep from out in the Clovis area, Hispanic male. I think he's going to give Leger Fernandez a really good fight. But in that Southern District 2, Gabe Vasquez is in the most vulnerable district in the state by far. Murphy's I think he's in that seat. I don't know because Southeast New Mexico has been split up so much. But it'll be interesting to see if Murphy decides to run for governor or decides to jump in the House race, because definitely Vasquez is vulnerable. He's vulnerable every year unless they redraw those lines in a way that protects him and takes some votes away from some of the other Democrats. So it's going to be fascinating to see where all the chips fall with these races. But yeah, I think here we are in September. We've got a few months ahead of us, and obviously, realistically, we're talking early December. Nobody's going to announce their big campaign for governor on December 24th or December 28th. They really need to do that by the first part of December, and we'll see. I think Deb Haaland's vulnerable because she is so far to the left, but the Democratic Party keeps going to the left, and she's got a lot of money and influential backers behind her, and we'll see what happens in these races.
Well, I can't wait to talk to you more about that as we get closer to the primaries in June. Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation. We're looking at riograndefoundation.org, tippingpointnm.com, and erasoфenchantment.com. All three really good resources.
Thank you so much, and great chatting with you, Johnny.
All right, appreciate it, sir.
Take care.
You're listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889.